Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, so above, let you thank you, Lord, for the day that you've given us. Thank you, Lord, for the blessing of the Sabbath. Please be with us as we're going to be listening to your word. To your word, help us so that we might be able to be receptive to it. It is my greatest wish that when you come, our names may be found written in the book of life. For I've prayed all this in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.
I want to welcome you to our FNL today, and it is titled, It's Better I Die. It's Better I Die. And I'd like to think it came from a Bible verse when, if you're to look at Elijah's story, when he heard that Jezebel was looking for him through the grapevine. And you can imagine if it is in today's situation where you are told, Jezebel, you did something. And you know, it's not just Jezebel. This is Jezebel, the queen, right? Everyone literally works for her. The soldiers, the servants, even you, the citizens of that city. She owns you. And it means that you're in deep trouble. And then, for some reason, Elijah was like, nah, I can't do this. He goes to God and he's like, God, look, it's better I die. I'd rather die than die in the hands of a woman named Jezebel, because I'm sure everyone knew how evil Jezebel was, right? And if you're to look at that situation where he had succeeded in everything, but for some reason, because he just heard something through the grapevine that he was being sought after, akatanga kutya, and then he decides to run away and he wanted to kill himself. And if we're to look at today's context, just to bring it closer home, let's use an example of a university student who has recently graduated, top of their class, probably they even had a scholarship. Their future is bright. Others' future is bright. It's as bright as the stars, but theirs is as bright as the sun. Like, you just know they just need to just drop off a CV, mangwana uthunzi yakubaza. Atorina need ye interview, you know, as that person. And 2 years down the line, they're still unemployed. Their friends are driving fancy cars, bachirima pedestrian. You know how it is, they're a permanent resident Kumbok, they're a resident of Kumba. You know how it is, they're just sitting at home doing nothing. Now they just look at you like, if your siblings come, my siblings are better because you have seriousness, you know, Diana, in that situation you could see. And your siblings are younger than you, panga vachiri ku high school. Nikuti vangopasa, zvangonzaiwa iyo chimborara pasi. Iwo amborara pambeda nekuti chi. Their future seems a bit bright. Vanenge vari kuziva zvavari kuita. You know, that type of thing. And you're in that context. Now, if you think it's going to get better, I'm sorry to tell you, Kuti, just imagine life becomes worse than that. There's nothing better than that. His friends are getting married. Everything is going on well for them. And his is just going down and down. And now you get to a point whereby you're just like, you know what, you know, I've worked so hard to get to this point and nothing is working. 10 years I'm at home, nothing. My friends don't even see me as a friend anymore. My family members, they see me as a burden. It's better I die, you know. You've lost all hope. And it's the same situation at Elijah, whereby he couldn't find any other way of getting himself out of that situation. He couldn't even think of another reason why he should leave. And he's like, it's better I die. And that's suicidal ideation. And so, what do you think would have really happened for someone to get to that point? You know, if I'm to say, you know what, it's better I die.
Yeah, it's some what you've just said is something that's relatable to a lot of us. Life does get hard, and you get into situations where sometimes the thought of not existing seems better than going through what you're going through, Andy. But since we're talking about suicidal ideation, I think it's important from the jump for us to define what suicidal ideation is and the different stages that exists, because there's a spectrum in suicidal ideation. So basically, suicidal ideation is thinking about killing yourself. I'm sure all of us are aware what suicidal ideation is, but there's a spectrum. So it starts from no suicidal thoughts. The thought of killing yourself does not exist in your mind, right? And then another stage is intrusive thoughts. How many of us have had intrusive thoughts? Like you're driving out of nowhere and then you just think, "Kondigango, what if I just," all right? It's a common occurrence where the thought of death just comes into your mind, right? And then the next stage is passive suicidal ideation. Passive suicidal ideation is like what you've mentioned, Kuti. It's better if I just die. Some of us maybe even have had prayers, Lord, I just don't want to wake up tomorrow, right? Upenyu waoma. Like if the option is there where there's just a switch that you could just press where your life doesn't exist anymore, that's suicide. That's passive suicidal ideation, right? The next stage is active suicidal ideation, where you actually think of a plan on how you would do it, right? So, for example, you'd start thinking, Kuti, so what would be the best way to unalive myself? Maybe, would I use a gun? Would I use a rope? Or would I use poison? What would
Time to kill yourself.
exactly, would I do it panevanu? Or would I do it, like you'd plan it out? So that's active suicidal ideation, where you have a certain plan that you would execute if you do decide to get on with it. Then the next stage is suicidal attempt. A suicidal attempt, as it says in the name, you actually attempt to commit suicide. So understanding that there are differences in suicidal ideation helps us to know what sort of intervention would work. So if a friend of yours tells you, Kuti, I've just been having intrusive thoughts about death, would it then be ideal to call emergency services to have that person committed? Probably not. It would be counterproductive. But if someone actually has like a plan, then you know that they are at a higher risk of committing suicide. So knowing the different stages of suicidal ideation helps us to understand what is the best way to assist someone who's having trouble with thoughts of death and killing themselves.
I think you can already see, according to the panel, that there are some that are the common people, and there are some that use the big words to understand these things. There's a part that you said, which was quite interesting. It's interesting because as I'm sitting and I'm looking at the auditorium and at the people, you look so sad, like as if you've never thought, but you know, and as you're saying, things can get tough, you know? Things can get tough. Ndio wajola 8 years, putting your all to it. Mangwana makuseni dada zvavarana. And you're asking yourself, what's wrong with me? And the question then that I have in my mind is this. When I was thinking, especially when you're talking about the passiveness, pane team rekuti, or maybe it's a mindset, avanyanye ku affectwa with problems that much as the other person. Like they can muscle it. And my question is, takasiyana siyana ere in terms of mental strength, yekuti ini ndogona kuti amazi njolo wadhakwa ba ndogona kuti ngomga makwana makuseni choti bolato ndakutofamba. But umwe munhu andoti Jesu dai zvangobva zvaita se zvavharana. I think actually thank you. It was retitled and said Jesu ndofa zvangobvarana. Is there something like that?
Yeah, there is. So if you're to look at suicide is the act, right? But if you're to look at the background situation, when you go for counseling or therapy, they usually ask you, in your family, do you have people who had depressive disorders? Do you have people who committed suicide before? Because sometimes these things are genetically imprinted in us. And so, like you said, Jim Jolo, right? 8 years you've dated, next thing, Mangwana, boom, relationship has ended. I could wake up and be like, we move. You know what? Heart made of steel, gone. Just like that. And then another person, relationship, you're 2 weeks. I'm not going to commit suicide. In fact, atongo rambwa nemskana, asata atongo pinda mu relationship. And they're thinking of killing themselves. So genetics sometimes do play a major role as to how much stress level we can accept or tolerate as ourselves. And this is now where the problem comes. Yokuti, losaka mchizonza mwa mnashiti, na yonga tuneseka nikushare mari. Isusu tinema problems ane 15 years. I've been married to this problem of mine for 15 years, and you're telling me, Kuti, you're worried about money. You know, that type of thing. Kuti, people tell you, Kuti, sometimes it's just genetics. They are stronger than you, and some are not. I cannot say they're weak. It's just that they were unfortunate enough just to have that gene imprinted in them.
Okay. As you were speaking, I was thinking back to the Bible. You give an example of Elijah, right? Imagine the miracle that had just happened prior to the messenger getting to Elijah and telling him that, look, Jezebel is after you and you're in trouble. And then let's give a contrast. Job, right? Job laments, but there is no point in his life where he asks God to take his life. He is constantly asking God, why this? Why has this happened? Why has this happened? But he doesn't get to the point where he's like, no, I would rather die, you know. But Elijah, because of fear of some woman, he gets to a point where he says, I would rather die. And then I also want us to go to Jonah, right? Jonah in Jonah chapter 4, I think it's verse 1 to 3, right? He's angry. He's angry with God. And as he's angry with God, what does he say to God? I would rather die. Just unalive me, you know? And I'm trying to think, isn't in as much as we say sometimes it's genetics, between the three men, apart from genetics, what else could come into play in terms of suicidal ideation or the attempt itself? Or maybe in this case, they didn't have the strength to even attempt the suicide, so they asked God to do it on their behalf.
Yeah, all right. So to clarify on what Elizabeth was saying, having a genetic predisposition does not necessarily mean that you are helpless, right? It's like having a loaded gun. You have to pull the trigger. Something has to trigger it for something like that to happen. The fact that there is mental illness in your lineage does not automatically mean that you're going to have a mental illness as well. There are certain things that can exacerbate you. That can
English.
Rona Ramba. There are certain things that can increase the chances of you falling into the mental illness that may be in your lineage. For example, if there's a history of depression or psychosis in your family, and you choose to take alcohol. Alcohol, by its nature, is a depressant, right? So by taking alcohol, you are putting yourself at a higher risk of being depressed because the chemicals that you're taking.
I have a question. Can I just ask?
Yeah.
Alcohol, but don't you start drinking alcohol because you're triggered because of the problems before satwatanga kutasa zvimwe zvese izvi?
Well, that then becomes an argument of what came first, the chicken or the egg. So, knowing that you are at risk, it's, for example, if diabetes runs in your family, your lifestyle will determine whether or not you will get diabetes. You're at a higher risk than everyone else, so you must be more cautious than everyone else, right? So with regards to genetic predisposition, that's the issue. So our lifestyles and habits influence how much of a risk we have of being mentally ill. So also, you mentioned the different people in the Bible. There are things called unhelpful thinking styles. The way you view problems is very important, right? There are different types of unhelpful thinking styles. So there's catastrophizing, as the word implies. When something bad happens, in your head, it's the end of the world, right? That's catastrophizing. There's filtering. Filtering is when something bad happened, like you mentioned with Job and with Elijah. They didn't see all the miracles that had happened, but the only things that they could focus on are the troubles that just came up. So in your frame of reference, you are filtering out all the good experiences, and you then magnify the bad experiences. So there's catastrophizing, overgeneralization, blaming.
Okay, so where does Jonah fall? Because maybe Diana, explain your story.
Yeah.
Jonah, you said you was angry at God. Please explain, maybe, because I actually want to understand his story first.
Okay. So where do I start with Jonah? Remember, Jonah is an Israelite, and he is sent to Nineveh. Nineveh, where we had the Assyrians. The Assyrians were notoriously known for abusing, for lack of a better word, for abusing the Israelites. They killed the Israelites. They did everything they could to make the Israelites' life miserable. So now Jonah is sent to go and preach to these guys. They are Assyrians. They are Gentiles. So he's thinking, this God is supposed to be our God. These people have not been good to us. So why in the first place should I go, right? He runs away. We know the story. He is dramatic on the ship, and then he actually gets to a point where people lose their possessions and all that stuff, and then he's thrown into the sea, right? Eventually, he ends up in Nineveh, right? And before going there, he actually says, I know you're a just God, and you forgive these people. So he goes, he preaches, right? And then God forgives the people that caused him hurt, that caused him pain, and he still has that memory within him. It's imprinted. Back home, there is people that have died because of these people that have repented. So he's angry at God. God, why have you forgiven? Now that you have forgiven them, I would rather die. Right? So he gets to a point where he says, God, just kill me.
Okay. I think according to what you were saying, I think maybe it falls around filtered, where there's something good that has happened, but you neglect the good and you focus and zoom in on the bad. And I think we are also found wanting so many times in our situations. Even at work, where one day can turn out to 365 days of bad.
Oh, yes.
Because we just filtered the event that has happened Konamanj today, and that ruined me today. And then, like what he was also saying, that the little small thoughts that start building in. Do I deserve to be here? Is this the best for my life? Oh no, I remember last time I had Mjolo was 2 years ago. My salary has never gone up.
You sound like you're speaking to the overthinkers. Are you?
I think you're getting there. And you're building the momentum. And you're stepping in from one level to another level. One level to another level. Till you get to that point where you just wake up and say, Janas. You get it? Yeah.
I was thinking of the issue, the rich guy, Job.
Oh, yes.
You see, the wife is the one who was like, curse God and die. And if you're to look at that, driving a certain car, you're supposed to look a certain way, but she has to have a nice body. Now she doesn't have that. And then now you're thinking, how is society going to accept me